Frances Hardinge és escriptora d'obres infantils i juvenils de fantasia fosca. Ha guanyat premis com el preuat Premi Costa al millor llibre de l'any i ha sigut seleccionada per la prestigiosa Medalla Carnegie. En català, la novel·la La cançó del cucut va rebre el Premi Llibreter 2019 de literatura infantil i juvenil d'altres literatures i la novel·la La veu de les ombres va rebre el Premi Alba 2020 a la millor novel·la fantàstica per a joves traduïda al català. Aquest 2025 ha visitat el Festival 42 de Gèneres Fantàstics de Barcelona i jo he aprofitat l'oportunitat de conversar amb ella una estona. Frances, thank you so much for joining me in my channel.
Oh, thank you very much for having me.
It's such a pleasure. You know, I once read a comment where someone described you as literally the Einstein of YA literature. And the thing is, you do break the laws of physics in your books, and time bends and flies when we read them.
Thank you very much. That's extremely kind. I do like subverting expectation and bending any rules I can get away with.
First of all, I wanted to tell you something that happened to me. The other day, I was moderating a children's book club, and we were talking about Island of Whispers, which I really enjoyed. But some kids were like, "This book is so weird." And I said, well, it's a fantasy book. But they were like, "We didn't know fantasy could be like this. We thought fantasy was all about unicorns and wizards." And that made me think that people nowadays still have many prejudices against fantasy books. So what's your definition of fantasy? Are there any limits?
I'd say there are only the limits that we create ourselves as writers. And we do need to create some, because we don't want the reader just drowning in this sort of void of confusion. But fantasy, like science fiction, is governed by the great what if. Any time you are stepping back and saying, the world need not be this way, you are stepping into the realm of fantasy. And while some people have a cliched idea of what a fantasy world looks like, actually there's so much freedom, providing you then give your new world structure and rules that allow it to make sense, allow your reader to believe in it and invest in it.
I do agree. And what assumptions on what fantasy should be like drive you nuts? Like, I hate it when adults automatically categorize fantasy books as children's books. And of course, they never give children's books or young adult books a chance.
I think any time where people have decided that fantasy is silly and in some sense boring because they simply haven't read enough fantasy books, then that irks me. There was one occasion where I was running a workshop at a school, and I'd told all the students to create a character, and I told them that they had freedom, that there were a number of questions they needed to ask themselves about the character, but the character didn't have to be human. And one of the girls decided she wanted to create a dragon. And I heard her teacher, who was looking at what she'd producing, saying, "Oh, don't create a dragon. Dragons are boring. They're always the same. They have leathery wings and they breathe fire. No, there's nothing interesting there."
Really?
Yes.
Oh my God.
So I walked over smiling to him and said, "It's very interesting that you should say that." And then talked at some length about the different ways that people had interpreted dragons, both in legend and in fiction, and how much freedom there really was. And I did all of this loudly enough that the girl could hear. She created her dragon. It was fantastic. It had had a back history of burning down fairyland.
I love it. Wow. Again, I'm 100% with you there. So, in your most recent novellas, Island of Whispers and The Forest of Thousand Eyes, illustrated by Emily Gravett, you've mixed travel, treacherous seas and forests and fight all sorts of monsters including a few humans, which can be the most dangerous ones. But if you could live an adventure inside one of these stories, which world would you choose?
Oh, you mean which one would I want to go into?
Yes.
I'm not sure I'd want to go into any of them. You see, I should never become a god. I am horrible to the little people who live in the worlds I create.
If you had to choose.
Oh, goodness. I was going to say perhaps one of the historical settings that I use, but they're terrible too. Because I drop my characters into particularly troubled times.
Oh, yes. There's this Chinese expression when they want to wish something very bad to their worst enemies. They say, shall you live in interesting times?
Yes, absolutely. I ensure that all my poor characters live in interesting times and interesting places. Possibly the myriad of deep light. There are some downsides, like the history of horrendous, hideous sea gods, but it's a seafaring nation. So you get a lot of travel up and down the archipelago, and you could get on a boat and go from island to island and experience the different islands, slightly different cultures. So I might like that, providing some of the things that happen in deep light don't happen to me.
And what about the world of Island of Whispers and the Forest of Thousand Eyes? If you had to choose, where would you travel?
Ooh, choice between Island of Whispers and Forest of Thousand Eyes. Probably Island of Whispers, because most of the time, as long as you're alive, you're mostly fine.
Well,
providing the ferryman is doing his job. The ferryman's job, obviously, being to make sure that the spirits of those who have died are taken on his boat away to whatever waits them next, and are not wandering around the island, blighting everything and causing danger to the living. Obviously, if he misses a couple of ghosts, less good. But then again, Forest of a Thousand Eyes, you're essentially living in a wall, which is the only human habitable space now, surrounded on all sides by a voracious, terrifying forest that hates humans.
Actually, I wanted to ask you that, nature always plays an important role in your books. She's not happy, but she has the right to be angry. If she could talk, like she does, for example, in The Forest of Thousand Eyes, what do you think she would tell us now?
I think a lot of it would be unprintable. And I can't fault her. I think she might also point out that we're killing ourselves. Though what I quite like about nature is a lot of it isn't necessarily reasonable. And it doesn't have to be. I like the momentous forces of nature that we haven't tamed yet. I have a colossal fondness for volcanoes.
Oh, really?
Yes. Angry mountains. I have my third book, which I think unfortunately is not translated into Catalan, features a lot of volcanoes. In fact, they are sort of characters in the book. And I like the fact that, we can measure their activity, we can run away if they're about to do something, but most of the time we can't stop them. But yes, I ran up and down and sometimes inside some active volcanoes.
Really?
I have claimed volcanoes as a business expense.
Wow, that's impressive. So, if you had to choose one force of nature, would you choose volcanoes then?
I do. Oh, it's difficult because I also love the sea. That is another great force.
You can tell.
Yes. The sea is essentially a character in several of my books. In Island of Whispers, it's effectively a character, again in deep light, and actually in Belitry as well, because they are, most of the action happens on this Channel Island, imaginary Channel Island called Vane, where, again, the sea is, it's not a big island, the sea is omnipresent. And the sea has the delight of being so changeable. So it doesn't just have personality, it has moods.
Yes, indeed. And you were also saying that, nature would probably tell us, what are you doing, you silly humans? And I think humans are indeed the only animals that trip twice over the same stone. And I love how you talk about the darker sides of human nature in your books, like greed or selfishness. But at the same time, you show us some of the brightest ones as well. The power of empathy, friendship, teamwork. We constantly need to be remembered about them, aren't we?
I think so. I like to think of myself as a cynical optimist. I think I am fairly clear-sighted about people. Obviously, there are lots of supernatural dangers in my books, but quite often the greatest sources of evil in them is human evil. But at the same time, humans are endlessly surprising creatures, and not all the surprises are bad. They have great potential for sudden, unexpected empathy, courage, moments of revelation where they manage to overcome their prejudices or their sense of difference to achieve something better or higher. And yes, I absolutely like to try and capture these moments. And it's not always my heroes. Sometimes there'll be a minor character or a no-name character who you see, the phrase I use in my own head is making the jump. There is a gap psychologically that it is difficult for them to jump, but somehow their better self rises up and they make the jump.
And what makes them make the jump, do you think?
It very much depends on the situation, but it is often a flash of empathy, or conscience, or a gut instinct that the way things are going is not right, that actually they can't be part of this and that maybe they need to stop it.
Or in The Forest of Thousand Eyes, your main character literally jumps many times as well.
Yes.
In the ending scene. Okay, we're not going to spoil anything,
Yes,
but
absolutely.
She literally jumps to, what she thinks is unfair.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yeah, there is something that the main character does towards the end, which is absolutely overcoming a lot of completely understandable feelings in order to do something which is very courageous and very generous.
And I love how the other character, you say that the other character will spend the rest of his life thinking of why she did that.
Yes, I think he will never understand. But I want the reader to understand him.
Yes. That's so important. And before we started recording, we were talking about the magic of sharing our reads, talking to other readers, and also in your talk with Julia Baena, I asked you what was a surprising response to your books from your readers, and your answer really, really surprised me. So, what is the most surprising thing a reader has ever told you?
As I say, there are many responses that have surprised me. One that surprised me was that somebody had a very positive reaction to a villain in Deep Light. In fact, a character who is actually quite emotionally abusive, but this young person really liked him. I thought, oh dear. Oh well. I've also been very moved any time it has turned out that my book has meant something to somebody and made a significant difference to them. And it has not always been the books that I would expect. But in particular, as I was saying in the earlier interview, there's a book of mine called A Face Like Glass, which I think has not been translated into Catalan. Fantasy set in this underground city where most people do not have natural expressions. And so they need to be taught expressions. One by one. It's a slow, when they're very young, a slow process. So they have like a repertoire of expressions. The poor just have a handful. The richer might be able to get special designer expressions to supplement their repertoire. But there is this one girl, my main character, who does have natural expressions. In fact, her face shows very clearly what she's thinking and feeling all the time. And so she is a fish out of water. She is always expressing herself differently from everybody else around her. And what I did not expect is that a number of young people who are neurodivergent have said that they identify very strongly with this character, Never Fell. And I did not see this coming, but it makes me very happy.
And you've also joined different book clubs while being here in Barcelona, and I'm sure throughout the years. So again, what's the most endearing experience you've shared with, these book clubs, with talking to readers?
I love all of them. I mean, anytime I find that somebody has bonded with a character, or it has struck a note with something in their lives, I absolutely love that. Because it makes me feel as if my book is my child, but my child has grown up and has gone out into the world and is living its own life and making new friends and developing other aspects to its life that I don't even know about. And of course, my book now speaks more languages than I do.
That's true. Wow, that's amazing. So, Frances, I'm sure you've probably answered this question 1,000 times, but I needed to ask, why do you always wear this particular hat?
I am a habitual hat wearer. So this is not my author hat for public appearances.
Mm-hmm.
I wear hats all the time. So every time I leave the house, hat goes on.
That used to be the norm not so long ago.
Indeed, but I mean, even when I'm in friends' houses and so forth, the hat is on. The reason for this particular style of hat is that when I was young, I watched a lot of black and white movies, particularly detective thrillers and gangster movies and spy movies, and they all had these really cool hats. So for me, this feels like an adventure and mystery hat, and every time I leave my house and I put this on, I feel like I am potentially going out on into a world of mystery and adventure.
I think everyone should do that.
Oh, well, I do too.
Let's start wearing hats again.
Absolutely. I mean, it's not my only hat. I have a number.
How many hats do you have?
I don't know. Some of them are quite silly. The silliest hat I have is about this big. It looks a bit like a French Foreign Legion hat, except that it has a little tea set on the brim with a little teapot, little cups and saucers, and brown thread coming out of the spout of the teapot to look like tea. It's a little bit front heavy, so I have to be very careful wearing it.
That's the most British hat I've heard of. I love it.
I couldn't resist.
Oh, it's very Alice in Wonderland as well, right? Just like the kind of hat you would wear, to meet the Mad Hatter. And
oh, that would be dangerous. They'd try to put real tea in it.
Yes, that's true. That's true. And on the other hand, is there a question nobody has asked you yet that you'd like to answer?
I can't think of one because people have asked me all the questions I could think of and quite a lot more.
Okay.
I mean, they haven't asked me questions like, would you like this £1 million? I mean, I would like to be asked that.
Oh, yeah, me too. I have to say, me too. And you were also telling me that you feel so grateful to be able to make a living of writing.
Yes.
You were expecting to.
Absolutely. Because however hard you are trying, and it does take a lot of stubbornness to become a writer, there is always an element of luck. There are people who are extremely talented and who try very hard to get published and do not have the luck. So I think it is important to feel the gratitude and humility about the luck one has had, as well as seeing that the effort one has put into developing one's craft and putting one's work out there is a part of the success.
Mm-hmm. And I'm still thinking about that girl you told me about at the beginning, the one who wanted to write about a dragon, to create a character that was a dragon. So what would you tell to all these girls and boys who are maybe afraid of, being free to create all they want?
I would say the same thing that I would say to my younger self, which is, weird is fine. Feel free. Experiment. It doesn't matter if you get things wrong or things don't work out. If you try things and they don't work, then that's a sign that you are not playing it safe. Using the cliches is playing safe because you're using the mental images that other people already have in their heads. You don't have to do that. So use your dreams, use your nightmares, use the funny idea that popped into your head which you haven't seen in a book anywhere. You don't need to rewrite books you've already read.
Wow, I love it. Frances, thank you so much. And you've heard her. Let's be weird together. Frances, thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me. It's been lovely talking to you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.